Hi, this is Alex from devstories.eu, OpenAPI and Swagger Ecosystem. Episode 1 of 19. APIs power the modern web, but how do they actually talk to each other without endless trial and error? You need a reliable way to know exactly what a server expects and what it will send back before you write a single line of code. That mechanism is the API contract, governed by the OpenAPI Specification. The OpenAPI Specification is a standardized, language-agnostic interface for REST APIs. Think of it as an architectural blueprint. When properly defined, both a human and a machine can look at this blueprint and understand exactly what a service does. They do not need access to the source code, they do not need to read separate PDF documentation, and they do not need to inspect live network traffic. The specification clearly outlines the available endpoints, the precise inputs they require, and the exact structures of the data they return. It is written in plain text using either YAML or JSON, which makes it universally readable by automated tools and human developers alike. If you work with APIs, you have probably heard the term Swagger. People often use Swagger and OpenAPI interchangeably, but they represent entirely different concepts today. Originally, the specification itself was called Swagger. In 2015, the creators donated the specification to the Linux Foundation, where it was officially renamed the OpenAPI Specification. Today, OpenAPI refers strictly to the rules and the standard. Swagger refers to the ecosystem of commercial and open-source tools built by SmartBear that implement those rules. For example, Swagger UI generates interactive documentation, and Swagger Editor helps you write the files. You write an OpenAPI document, but you might use Swagger tools to visualize it. This brings us to the real power of the specification, which is design-first development. Without a clear contract, API development usually happens linearly. The backend team writes the code, exposes a new endpoint, and then hands over some written documentation. Meanwhile, the front-end team sits idle, waiting for the backend to finish so they can start wiring up the user interface. Here is the key insight. When you adopt OpenAPI, you invert that process. Before anyone writes application code, both teams agree on the OpenAPI document. This text file becomes a strict contract that removes all guesswork. The backend team uses it to generate server stubs and validate that their implementation meets the agreed requirements. Simultaneously, the front-end team uses the exact same document to generate mock servers. They can immediately start building the user interface, making network requests to a simulated backend that behaves exactly like the final API will. Neither team blocks the other. Because this contract is machine-readable, it also permanently solves the problem of outdated documentation. When an API requirement changes, you update the specification file first. Your tooling then automatically regenerates the web documentation, the mock servers, and the client libraries. The documentation and the code remain perfectly synchronized because they share a single source of truth. An API specification is not just a mechanism for generating nice web pages. It is a foundational communication protocol for your engineering teams that turns human assumptions into executable rules. If you enjoy the show and want to support us, search for DevStories EU on Patreon. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.